Fishing Planet has a diverse selection of rods and reels for various situations. Depending on what fish you're targeting, the specific type of rod setup can mean the difference between an action-packed fishing trip and a tough day on the water. In this video, I'll be covering both the feeder and the bottom rods in depth, explaining the differences between the two rod types, while also telling you some of the basics of assembling the rod, as well as what sorts of fish tend to prefer the bottom setups. If you find this video helpful or entertaining in any way, leaving a like or subscribing to the channel would be a huge help. This will be the first video in a series of beginner guides to help newer players understand the basics of Fishing Planet. And with that being said, let's get into it. This here is an example of the feeder rod. Taking a look at some of the different parts of this setup, you'll see that this rod has a couple of defining features to it. The first being a weight that's attached to the line. This will ensure that your line has enough weight to sink to the bottom of a lake or river. You will see in the description of this rod that there's a casting weight range listed. It's important to know that the casting weight range of your rod is to avoid using too little weight, which will hurt your casting distance, or more importantly, to avoid using too much weight that, if too heavy, can completely snap your line. Moving on, another important part of a feeder or bottom rod setup is the leader. The leader is the line that will be running from your weight down to your bait and hook. Generally speaking, it's almost always best to match the weight of your main line to the weight of your leader. For example, you'll see here I'm using a 6-pound mono line as my main line, and I'm pairing it up with a 7-pound mono leader. Continuing on, every feeder and bottom rod setup will use a spinning reel, as casting reels aren't compatible with any rod except for casting rods. This reel here works really well as it has a 6.4 pound maximum drag that matches my line and my leader when using the reel one notch down from maximum drag. Here, you'll see a bell that I've equipped. Bells are optional and aren't required to complete a feeder or bottom rod setup, but having a bell attached is nice if you're using a rod stand that doesn't have a bite alarm, or if you just enjoy hearing a little jingle every time a fish bites. The last part of a feeder rod setup are the quiver tips that you can adjust here with these different colored squares. The red circle equips a heavy, less sensitive tip, and the white circle equips a light and sensitive tip that can be good for smaller fish. The quiver tips are the only thing that differentiate feeder rods from bottom rods, as bottom rods are just heavier versions of feeder rods that are unlocked later on in the levels. So everything I talked about in setting up a feeder rod also applies when setting up a bottom rod. As you can see, this bottom rod setup here has all of the same parts as the feeder rod, except for the quiver tips. When using either a feeder or bottom rod, the objective is to target fish that are lying near the bottom of the water, especially fish that prefer deeper pockets of water such as catfish are where the bottom rod excels. Using either a map on a boat or your iPad, finding deeper areas of water to target is a good habit to build if you plan on using a bottom setup. Another useful thing about the bottom and feeder rods is the ability to have your bait stay stationary in a moving body of water, such as rivers or creeks. This can help avoid annoying recasting when your bait floats too far down a moving body of water. Another useful trick to do with the bottom setup is checking the depth of a certain area you're casting into, just by casting your bottom rod and letting your bait hit the bottom. It will give you the exact depth of the area you cast it into. This can be helpful in deciding what sorts of lures or other setups you can use to best fish the area with. So even if you don't plan on using your bottom setup, still bringing one everywhere you go can be a useful tool to help navigate new bodies of water. Personally, bottom rod setups are my preferred bait fishing rods due to their versatility and reliability in moving bodies of water. Getting into talking about some of the different fish species that tend to prefer bottom setups, it's important to know that almost any kind of fish will be able to be caught with the bottom rod setup, depending on the depth of the water. But moving on to some of the fish species that prefer bottom setups, any catfish, no matter the shape or size, will gravitate towards the bottom column of the water. So targeting some of the young channel cats at Lone Star, flatheads at Neherrin, or some big blues at St. Croix will be easy work. Another fish that prefers the bottom of the water is the walleye. I'm sure if you've seen any other Fishing Planet videos on YouTube about farming to get credits and XP, that the Emerald Lake Walleye Setup Farm was recommended to you at the early levels. Well, feeder setups are a perfect match for targeting loads of walleye at the bottom of Emerald. Some other noteworthy fish to mention in the early levels include the white sturgeon at San Joaquin, the lake trout at White Moose, the barbel at Tiber, and all the different carp species. But I'll be doing another video specifically on carp, as you can catch them on bottom setups, but special carp rods are preferable for a large majority of carp. Moving on to some target fish for bottom rods at the later levels, the beluga sturgeon and Wells catfish at Aktuba and or the new Dnipro River coming later this month, the redtail and gilded catfish at Marin, the giant Paraiba catfish in the Amazon, and the big Kamba catfish in the Congo are all fish to look forward to catching. Bottom and feeder rods are useful for almost any player, no matter your skill or experience level, so becoming familiar with them early on will benefit you greatly as you further your leveling into stronger fish and larger bodies of water. And that's going to do it for the introduction into bottom and feeder rod setups. If you enjoyed the video or found anything in this video helpful, be sure to leave a like and or subscribe for more Fishing Planet content. Thank you all very much for helping the channel reach 100 subscribers. It means a ton and helps me motivate me to keep releasing videos to help all of you out. And with that being said, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all boatside.